So I quickly introduced him. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our second GenAI tutorial hosted by Midas. We're really excited that you could join us today. So our second tutorial will be led by Dr. Seth Temple, who is a Schmidt AI postdoctoral fellow here at Midas, and I'll let him introduce himself too. But his session is how to use GenAI for coding. And so I know this is a very interactive session, so I'm just going to let him get started. All right, Seth, take it away.
Okay, cool. So thank you, Shahana. I'm a postdoc here. I did my PhD in stats, and I'm one of roughly 30 people who comprise at Schmidt some faculty fellows and then also some postdoctoral fellows. And then something that sort of connects us all, we're coming from a lot of different disciplines in biology, chemistry, math, physics, is that we're all trying to find a way to use AI in our research. And while a particular use case could just be using AI to help you do code and data analysis and be much more productive. So that's going to be the goal of this talk, is a lot of different tutorials and exercises where I'm going to try to use generative AI for coding. So I really don't have any particular agenda to get through all of my slides or all of my material. The main goal is that you might walk away learning something about how you could use coding with AI. And yeah, so we'll do certain things, like we're going to be prompting the chatbot to say write entire scripts for certain analyses we want to do. For the sake of sort of making trustworthy AI coding, we're going to try to make some unit tests to verify correctness, documentation, debugging, plotting. I really think plotting and documenting is one of the best use cases when it comes to coding. And if we get to it, some AI-assisted data analyses. So I think I will be talking for at least 60 minutes, and we have the room for 2 hours. So I'm happy to just keep going through exercises and being very interactive, and I will not be offended if you leave at some point because you have other meetings. So before I get into the very hands-on exercises aspect, I just have 2 quick slides to sort of set the stage of what these large language models, how they work. And I say most because you could consider different types of model architectures, but there really is one predominant architecture that a lot of these LLMs use, which is called the transformer. There's a lot going on in the transformer, but the sort of main idea in this is what's referred to as the attention mechanism. And so how these natural language models will work is that you have a word, and in the parlance of AI, we will refer to these as tokens. And they will encode these words into these like very long arrays of numerical values. And the idea is that you might have an encoding of, say, the word dog, and then you might have an encoding of the word young. And somehow they have found in some of these like explainability AI fields that like if you sum the encoding, the numerical encoding of say young plus dog, you might end up in the encoding of puppy. And so these numerical values are a way in which we can think about words so that these computers can learn how words relate to each other. And the attention mechanism is really just a bunch of matrix multiplications and additions. And you do a lot of this in sequence. And these matrices are these numerical values that we are going to try to learn. And it's those numerical values that tell us how we can use the words to relate to each other and refine our understanding of these words in the context of a sentence. And so they often call these matrices the query, key, and value matrices. And this is for the sake of trying to interpret what these matrices might do. It's important to know that we often do not know what these matrices do. So this is sort of a metaphor about what it might possibly be learning. And so the query matrix typically is going to ask a question. So if I had the sentence, the yellow hairy dog likes to fetch, and I'm interested in the word dog and how the words around it provide a refined context about this particular dog. And so the query for dog might be asking a question, what adjectives might there be around me that are refining my understanding of the dog? And then when you multiply the key matrix by these word embeddings, it will ask you sort of searchable attributes of the particular tokens. So when you apply a key matrix, perhaps you will get information that yellow and hairy are adjectives, and the other words in the sentence are not. And if these queries and keys align together, these are going to be particularly useful words in the context to refine our understanding of dog. And then the final matrix is called the value matrix. And this says, okay, how can I use what I know about the query, the question I'm asking, and the key, the searchable attributes within the sentence context to refine my understanding of dog? So with yellow and hairy, I might have refined my understanding to sort of a class of dogs, like maybe a white or yellow Labrador retriever, or maybe a golden retriever, and a Chihuahua. And how these large language models operate is they're stochastic or random models. And so if you ask a question of the AI, each time you'll get a slightly different answer. And they work by predicting the next word or token in the sentence. And so I'll start a sentence that is like the dog, and I want to predict the next word. And possibly the majority of likely words that it will predict may be wags, runs, barks, and chews. And in these parentheses, I have sort of the probability that the next word might be one of these verbs. And then I'll sample based on these weighted probabilities. In this sense, I sampled and I got wags. So next I'm going to try and get the next word. So I've got the dog wags, and I've got his, its, and her. And it's important here to note that his was actually the most probable word, but it's not just taking the most probable next word. It's not a deterministic algorithm. So I did sample it, and in this case, I got its. And then at the final point, I got the dog wags its. And I have these words tail and paws. And in this case, it seems very certain that this will probably be tail instead of paws. Okay. So that's my brief overview of the large language model architecture. Here at the bottom, in the YouTube link, there's a great math YouTuber called 3 Blue 1 Brown who's made a really good playlist about this. And so he's much better at explaining this than I am with a lot better visuals. So I would refer you to that. Yeah. Yeah, if you were on Zoom, these slides will be available after the fact. Indeed, they're already on the internet. So, okay. So I think Shahana or Kelly sent an email about a setup you could do. So this is supposed to be particularly hands-on. This was the instructions to set this up on your personal computer. So you'd have downloaded what's referred to as Virtual Studio Code. which if you're on a Windows computer, you could have gone to its App Store. You would need a GitHub account, and there are instructions to add sort of GitHub Copilot, which is their large language model, to VS Code. If you've made it that far, I can briefly tell you what to do, which would be you would go to my browser, which here in this case, it's github.com /sdtemple/how to use AI. And I would go here in the fork button on the right. I won't actually be able to create the fork because I own the repo, but you would here click create fork, and it would create a fork where you could refine the repository to, instead of sdtemple, you would do your GitHub username. And then you can go here to this local thing. You can copy this. And then somewhere on your computer, you would write git clone and the copied URL. Okay. If that seems intimidating, or you haven't really set up GitHub and VS Code and all the necessary packages yet, you can just go here to code space on your forked repo and just create a new code space. It'll take maybe a minute or two to sort of load itself up. Yeah. So you can see right here, it's buffering a little bit, but the code space would be ready eventually. And I have actually found this problematic on Microsoft Edge, possibly because of a firewall. Okay. So you could do this, code spaces. Hopefully this will set up. Okay. So at this point on my terminal, which you might have some version of this on Mac or Windows, I opened that app. I used CD, which stands for change directory, and navigated to where this repository is. If you are just Git cloning from the internet, I wouldn't move around unless you really want to and feel comfortable with that. And if you had previously installed it somewhere, you can use ls, which will list all of the files in your current directory, which might help you navigate. So I'll write code space dot, which will load up VS Code for me. Well, that's fun. Okay, so I'm gonna take a water break for a minute, and does anyone have any questions right now for about a minute or two in getting things set up? Any questions? How many people have it already set up? Okay, that's good. And if you're not able to sort of immediately set it up, you could make a friend next to you, because it seems like there's at least some people on every table. and try and work with them. I'm not quite sure why my computer's slow today. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So right now, I am now in Virtual Studio Code. There are, at least in my case, there are these tabs over here. The main one that I'm gonna turn on and off is this button right here, which will show me the file explorer of what files are here. And then here in the middle, this is gonna be our code script that we're gonna be working on. And then if I come up here to toggle chat, I can open sort of the AI chat window. And I would do plus right here to create a new chat window. You can toggle between agent. So with the agent, you'll be able to ask it to sort of specifically write code and files on your computer. And it might do a lot of things. So we'll do that probably at the very end. For the majority of the time, I'm gonna toggle to ask. If you want to add context to your chatbot inquiries, you can do plus here and direct to particular files within the repository right now. And then you can also move around to different chatbots that you would like to use. So the default is probably this GPT-5 mini, but there are a bunch of other ones. Typically, if you look at the number at the end, smaller numbers will run a lot faster because these are smaller models. However, those might be less accurate than the larger ones. Okay. And yeah, so here, if you had ended up with the code space set up online, this should look very, very similar to what my VS Code is. It's mirroring that online. And you can, in the case when you're in this MD, which is a markdown file, you can click this button and see the markdown. So this is all online, and it's just a GitHub repository where after the fact, if you leave and we haven't gone through all the exercises, you can just start scrolling down and following the installation and the exercises. And at the very top, I have a lot of my favorite hotkeys, which is how I'm gonna navigate around and use the AI. I work on a Windows machine, so I'm gonna be using Control a lot, but I'm under the impression that if you're on a Mac computer, it'll probably be Command. And if this is not working, I would go to the internet and ask ChatGPT or or Google AI mode or something. Okay, any questions right now? Yeah.
I only see GPT 4.1 or.
Well, you have at least one AI model, so you'll be able to follow the exercises. I might have set things up and gotten a lot of models, as long as if you initially just enter the chat window and you can ask it something, I don't know.
Log into
I see. Oh, do you have to log in through your VS Code? Do you know how to do that? Which one? Mine might be a little different. Sorry. Yeah, I should have prepared for that. But Nathan is going to look that up right now and maybe try and help you if you haven't set up the Copilot within your VS Code. So can you raise your hand if you haven't gotten that or if you only have auto? And Nathan will move around. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to be trying to work through various exercises. So the first one, they're going to be titled exercise 0 through 8. And within these exercises, you can either follow the README. So this first exercise is we are going to say that we've never really coded in Python, and we'd like to have some simple functions to compute a mean and a standard deviation from a list of numbers. So we're going to ask the AI chatbot how to write these functions. And within these exercises, I've added basically the instructions and what are comment lines. And how you would ask the chatbot in this particular tutorial is I would uncomment these particular comment lines. So here I've uncommented this. And so this is actually based on the change in colors. This has become code within the script. And I'll be doing this where I enter the chat window and ask it questions. This first exercise actually is not using the chat window. So if you do have Copilot within, there's something called just the AI coding assistance that sort of automatically does something when you want to do something. So I started to write def, which stands for define, and that's defining a function in Python, and compute mean, and it started to predict what I would do. And so the way to accept that is tab, which is referred to as a tab complete. If you don't want to accept it, you can click escape. Okay, well, that wants to escape Zoom. That's a real bummer. Okay, I finally got it to, no, sorry. Well, I'm not going to use that command a lot. So okay, so I'll write def compute, and I'm going to tab complete it. And now I also want it to compute standard deviation. Sorry, I'm going to go back. Give me a moment. I'm just doing something so that I don't overwrite the GitHub tutorial. Okay. So, okay. My apologies for that. Okay. So I've titled, can you all see this well? I can try and zoom in more if it's hard to read. Okay. It's just a little hard for me to see. So I'm titling these underscore v1, and I'm going to change the version because at the end we're going to see if we do different calls or have different runs of the LLM completion, are we going to get roughly the same thing? Because I said before that it's going to give probabilistic outputs. Okay, I already did that. So second strategy here is to use what's probably the best hotkey here, which is Control plus I or Command I. For me, I can uncomment this entire block with Control /, and then I'll Control C and Control I, and then Control V for paste. And then I'm going to toggle to a smaller model because this should be a pretty simple response. And I clicked the play and it's thinking. Okay, so it spit out some stuff. You can see right here, if I go up a little bit, this is not quite the same as V1. And before I'm going to accept this, as I'm saying, Python is a little bit of pseudocode, so I'm just going to spot read a bit and see if it's doing something relatively correct. So here in compute mean, it seems like I'm adding different numbers to this value called total. And then at the end, I'm dividing by, this function is called len, so it's the length of the numbers in the list. So this is exactly what an average is. And you can roughly see for the standard deviation, it's doing something here that's like number minus the mean squared, which is a component of that function. So I think that's doing something pretty much right. So I'm going to accept that. I'm going to block comment that again with Control /. Otherwise, the script will crash because that's English and not Python. And I'll do the third type. So this one is, I believe, the same command, just to emphasize that there's something different every time I ask the chatbot. Okay. So far, have the people that are following along been able to get the Control I function and ask? Okay. So fortunately or unfortunately, there will be buffering, especially when I ask it specific questions. So that would be a great time to chime in if you have any questions. And it's unfortunate that it's going slowly. Okay. So I'm going to accept that. It looks slightly different than up here. And now I have slightly changed the script. So in the previous scripts, I've been saying that I basically know how to do nothing in Python. Now I'm going to say that I am a slightly more experienced Python programmer, and I would like the code that it's going to write to compute the mean and standard deviation to use NumPy, which is a package that stands for numerical Python. And I want it to use NumPy, but there are actually functions in NumPy that explicitly calculate the mean and standard deviation, so I'm asking it not to do that. For the sake of this example. Okay, let's just keep doing this one. Okay, it's getting a little faster. typically when you're writing the code, it starts to get a little faster because it's starting to understand previous things you've done within the file. And also it typically starts to get better at predicting the suggestions where you might tab complete. No. Okay, I'm gonna accept this. One feature you could do here is you can highlight over some component of the script, and I right-clicked and I went down to explain. And it's gonna start telling me, instead of writing code, what this is doing, explicitly calling out what these functions are, what numbers might be. Sometimes it will actually write formulas, which is really helpful. Okay, so I will turn that off. Play around with different chatbots. So here I'm going to ask it the same question, but I'll change this to V5, and I'm going to switch to GPT Mini.
You change the model of the system. But here is conversation.
Do you know that question, Nathan? If you change the model within your coding script, does it remember the context of everything you've previously done? Yeah, I don't think it will. I don't know that exact question. So we accepted that. In this case, I asked it a much longer question now. And here I am saying stuff like, I actually know pretty much nothing about Python. So I would like it to explain each step in the process. I also know very little about statistics, so I want it to really explain to me what that is and to include comments or documentation within each function. And so this is an example which is referred to, I believe, as kind of setting up some level of like a system prompt or giving, telling the chatbot what you're at and what you're possibly looking at before specifically asking what you want. So here you're probably noticing there's a lot more lines that are getting written. There's a lot more of these comment lines that are describing what's going on. So we'll accept that. I need to uncomment or comment this again. And I think in the last case, or no, that is my last case. So I'm gonna save exercise 1. And at the end of this file, I actually asked the chatbot to write this. It's going to run all of these functions that we just wrote in the terminal. And this is gonna be the way throughout this in which we will try to check, at least through printing things, if this has some level of correctness in what we've written. So when you're in the terminal, you can also tab complete after you've started to write things. So I started to write exe, and so it knows that there's a bunch of other files here that might have that title. So when I tab completed, it got to exercise. And if I continue to add to that, exercise 0, it will then, with another tab complete, finish the file name. Okay. And then I printed the results here. So I've got the different means. It seems like all versions of the functions we just wrote were 30, and we got all the same values for the standard deviation. So this could be one way in which you have some level of double checking what the AI just generated. If you ask it to do the same thing 2 or 3 times and print the results, and it doesn't give the same results, something went wrong. Okay. Does anyone have questions about exercise 0? Okay. Just a brief level of like, maybe here is like, okay, this has been challenging so far, versus up here is like, this was really easy, I should speed up. Could I get a quick poll? Just like mid? Okay, what are some other points? Should I speed up, go about mid, a little bit mid, a little bit higher? Okay, thanks. So exercise 1 is about just having it write functions again. And this is just setting up the scene for a recurring example that we're going to do. We're going to be trying to compute prime numbers and then what's referred to as the Fibonacci sequence. And so the prompt that I'm going to keep giving it is this prompt, or possible refinements of it, which is that I'm an amateur number theorist, but I'm curious about particular special sequences of functions. Could you write a couple Python functions? The first is that it'll write the nth number in the Fibonacci sequence and the first 10 prime numbers. And these should be slightly different functions here. So one of them will output just a single number and the other will output 10 numbers. I'm going to toggle back to Claude 4, which might be a little faster than GPT Mini. Okay. Maybe we should have like paid for really powerful access. Is this what? So you should, I think just with like a free version of GitHub, you will be able to have access to some models. And you get some amount of like credits, which correspond to dollars per month. I think I spent what's equivalent of about $1 in preparing for this. And I have GitHub Pro, so I have quite a bit more than just $1. So for simple things, I bet you could use this throughout. Okay, so, okay, nice. So within my account, I do have code completions included. I can do chat messages, and I think various models would be the premium request. So the GPT-5, I think, is a premium model, and I've used up 16% of this month. So I'm going to accept this. Something to note here is by default in this question, not by default, but in this particular prompt, it decided to give me some documentation, which is nice, for the different functions, which throughout, I believe they'll always be titled Fibonacci is prime and first 10 primes. And at the end of running the script, it says that it's going to print out some things. So I'm doing the exercises here in that you might work through after the fact or live right now. And under this folder called answers, I do have the answers I got from when I went through this exercise yesterday. Okay, so we'll save this. How I got to the terminal is I clicked this control and there's like a tick on the left side of my keyboard, about 4 keys up. And that's how I entered the terminal. I forget how else you could do this. I believe you could do something like terminal. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. I really enjoy, okay. So it's telling you actually the hotkey I clicked here and under view. So I'm gonna run exercise 1. And so the 10th Fibonacci number is 55, and then we've got the first 10 primes. I don't remember all the Fibonacci numbers, so later we're gonna do some debugging and checking to see if that's indeed correct. But I am pretty confident that those are the first 10 prime numbers. Okay, so that's the end of exercise 1. Okay, exercise 2 is about documenting your code. So I took my answers that I got from exercise 1, and I had some documentation here that it spit out. What I did here is I just deleted that, and I'm gonna see if it will write some documentation for me. So one way here is I can just start, oh, it already knew I wanted to document something. But I can start to just write the documentation and let it tab complete. I could also be more specific where I could ask it, please write documentation that tells me the types of the inputs and outputs. Also write some examples of running the function. So maybe I want a little bit more documentation than what tab complete gave me. Perhaps one thing we might be thinking about is not overusing the chatbot for simple things. So if you are somewhat experienced in programming, you maybe don't want to ask it for really simple things. Like I never would have asked it to write mean for me, because we've watched it buffer a lot, which has been somewhat annoying. It was faster previously. So I'm gonna accept that. For the rest, I usually seem to see that we got slightly different answers. And in this case, I didn't ask it to write, because I didn't use Control I to ask it specifically to tell me about some examples, it didn't do that. At the end, it's suggesting printing certain functions to the terminal when I run it. So I'm gonna tab complete that. I'm gonna go back to the terminal, and now we'll do Python exercise 2. And we got the same results. I think I said for if you want extra clout or credit, you could have it write particular doc strings. And when those doc strings have these scenarios where it's example, you could write another function or another script that might run unit tests to verify if it is actually giving you the examples that you think it should. So in this case, the AI hand wrote that it thinks the 0th Fibonacci number is 0, and the first is 1, and the 5th is 5. Let's see. So I already wrote this make unit tests because this is perhaps a little more advanced. And I will update this later. Testing the, sorry. I previously was doing something called the Catalan numbers, and Nathan suggested I do the Fibonacci numbers, so okay. So this make unit test file is trying to run some of this module. So it did 5 tests, and that's because I had written 5 different examples right here. Where is it? Back to my terminal. So it's finding the tests. It tried these different tests and it was expecting 0, and it said it was okay. Here I created a bug, or it's not supposed to ask for a negative number, and so it was expecting an error, and it gave it to me. So that's just one way to check for the correctness of your functions, and this is definitely a best software practice to write functions where you think you know the output, and make sure that your code does give that. Okay. I ran the unit test separately, but I think you could write the unit tests within exercise 2, and just specifically importing this doc test package. And here I'm asking the doc test to test the module. But I believe there's a different function if you're within the file already. I think this function probably does that. It's doc test, and it's just running this function Fibonacci, the examples within its doc string. So I believe in this exercise 3, I am asking it, I highlighted over this particular code, and maybe I think that this implementation of a prime number generator is slow. And I'm asking it to do different algorithms. So I'm no expert. I don't know what these approaches are, but there's something called the sieves of various, a Greek name and someone else's name. And I'm asking it to write implementations of that to generate the prime numbers. So I believe that's, I do think when I leave the file, it stops. So that's unfortunate. Okay, does anyone have questions right now? Okay. It's starting to do stuff. Okay, I'm gonna accept all of this and save the file, go back to the terminal. You can run this command called clear, and it just starts you at the top of the terminal and you don't have to see all the stuff before. Exercise 3. Okay, so I asked it to do 2 different implementations. I'm asking also to check if the 10 primes matched, and in this case it did. And I think if we had exercise 2 again, we did see that our initial implementation of the 10 prime numbers also agrees. Okay. Exercise 4. This is one of my favorite use cases. So I have a lot of experience in Python and R. Sometimes there might be a package in R that you really need to use and it's not implemented in Python, or you have collaborators that work in R and not Python, and you wrote something in Python, so you'd like to help your collaborators out and write it in R. You could think of other use cases of why you want to translate it. So in this command, I'm asking it to rewrite this Python code in R. You'll note within VS Code right now, if you've set up what's called like the linting feature for Python and R, it's got a bunch of these like, okay, something's going wrong, kind of like in Microsoft Word and Google Docs. It's not giving me the same color scheme as previously because this is all Python code. So I'm going to highlight over all of this. And do Control I. And here we go. So in general, the longer that you write your prompt, the longer it will take for the model to give you its next tokens. And I think it's not just running longer, it also will give you longer outputs. So if you like prompt the LLM with like a single sentence, it might write a very brief function, but if you prompt it with a very, very long thing, it's probably gonna also write very, very long things. I believe in VS Code, I looked this up, you can't like restrict the number of tokens, which is quite frustrating. So sometimes I don't want it to write like 200 lines of code, and at least for now, you're not able to restrict it. So I like to go to maybe specific parts of the code and maybe do something like write documentation for this function, something very brief so that hopefully it doesn't write a very long thing. Okay. We're gonna accept that. Okay. in the terminal, there's slightly different ways to run R versus Python code. So here I need to do R script, exercise 4.r, and they rewrote it, so it's spitting out the first 10 primes. It says that they agree, which is also what exercise 4 looked like. Or exercise 3. I copied all the code in exercise 3 into the R script. Okay. Okay, exercise 5 is about debugging. In this case, I created errors or bugs within these functions. And we will be able to see exercise 5 if we go back to the terminal. Exercise 5.py. Okay. So I had written something out here just for this tutorial to see what could be wrong. So the correct Fibonacci numbers for 5 and 7 should have been 5 and 13. But my V1 implementation of Fibonacci gave me 12 and 33. So if I did have some unit tests in my doc string, it probably would have given me an error. And then in my implementation of Fibonacci V2, an error occurred that there's an index out of range. So exercise 5, we're going to try and debug these. So here I'll highlight over this. This function provides the wrong outputs. Can you fix it and explain to me? Does anyone ever use debugging? Okay, nice. Okay, it's generating the edits. So I had asked it both not just to fix the function, but to also explain it to me. So it gave me a little bit more. It said that I needed to remove a +1 that was happening. So up here I had this, or I don't know where it was. Okay. And then it also, I didn't want it to do this because I highlighted over Fibonacci V1, but it's kind of difficult to control these. So it read forward into the file and also noticed that Fibonacci V2 well, in this case, it didn't actually tell me what was going wrong. So that's frustrating. Oh, so we'll accept that. Okay, I definitely don't like that. Okay. Yeah, so right now we're at 60 minutes, and like I said, we have the room for 2 hours, and I have a lot more exercises. So I will just keep going. So it said there was an erroneous +1 again. And so this time it didn't do anything to Fibonacci V2, which is nice. And here I'm gonna say this again. Can you help me debug this? Okay, so this is explaining that the error had to do with an indexing thing. With respect to it's going like -1 to something. I'll skip over that because not everyone might know Python, but I'm gonna save this and run it and see if it's now fixed. So it tested Fibonacci V1, it's giving me the right values. And when it tried to run V2, you'll note that an error did not occur, and it did indeed give me the right values. Okay. Yeah. It's possible. I don't do that. A lot of people are much more bullish on that, where, yeah, it's modular and there could be functions in other files. And a lot of people like to set up these things called agents and have the agent try to touch all of the files. I don't personally do that, but it is possible. I am more skeptical about letting the agent or the AI make too many changes all at once. Okay, exercise 6 is plotting. So now I'm in a notebook. If you haven't set up a notebook yet, you'll need to click up here and choose a kernel. In this case, I had a kernel called Hood River that was my typical kernel that just has some pretty standard Python functions in it. And it is currently loading up. Okay. And so I'm gonna generate some code. We'll just skip through this, but the code is creating a control group and then some treatment groups and randomly generating that the treatments might have had a different effect on some numerical value that we're studying, some quantitative value. And I'll go into the next code block and I'm gonna do Control I again to ask it to plot a box plot for box df, which is what our data frame is called, using this package called Seaborn. Okay. I'll just say, so after it makes this box plot, there are further exercises in exercise 6, asking it to plot different types of function or different types of plots for this data. I'm going to do Control Enter to see the plot that it created. And I find this quite useful. If you notice, there's a few lines. I know a lot of these commands for what's called matplotlib and Seaborn, but if you don't, it's nice to like just set up sort of starter code for what your plot could look like, and you could start to modify it a little bit. So here, this like plot X label, hopefully it's somewhat clear that that's defining the X label as group. So maybe you could like change this to Cohort or something. You could start to refine that to make it more like publication ready for student projects or research articles. And then you could also probably, after you get like the bare bones of a function, you could go into your browser and look for the documentation of that function. So I went to this Seaborn box plot that it made, and there's a lot of things that could be in it. So I only defined what the X and Y values are in a color palette, but you could play around with different things here. For example, in box plots, this WHIS stands for whisker, and that's something that I often do modify is how I'm computing the whiskers. So the default is to compute this this interquartile range scaled by like 1.5 in both directions. Okay. Yeah, for the sake of time, I just want to do what I think is a cool new feature, but is kind of scary, which is using an agent to do like full data analyses for you. So to use the agent, I'm going to enter like the full-on chat window, which we could toggle here, or the hotkey is going to be Control-Alt-I or Command-Alt-I. I'm going to create a new window. I created this file called agents.ai, which I think it's pretty flexible about how you can write things in this. So it's a markdown file where like you do these dashes to create lists. And so 2 instructions I've given the agent is that it should always run tasks in this particular environment. And I asked it to use specific packages in Python for various data analyses. Okay. And let's stop looking at the project. So I added the agent here, I think. I'm going to switch to agent. And then I am going to do hashtag file, and I created some randomly generated code in 2 data sets. I think one is called the nonsensical data set. So I'm going to complete that. And the agent is going to start to look into the files in this data set and tell us certain things. And we're now going to have like a conversation with the agent about the things in this data set. And in this case, it actually starts to tell us basically how it's thinking and what it's doing. It gets quite verbose. So it's a file that contains numerical values and some missing data, which is true. It has these nams. It has columns. One is a binary variable that stands for has healthy diet. And then there's various fruits and vegetables and candy that I've randomly assigned numerical values. It says that the data set appears to be standardized or normalized, which is because many of the values are between -3 and 3, which is true. In randomly generating, I did randomly generate from a normal distribution. They're all in scientific notation. It seems like this would be the target variable if I was gonna fit a regression. This looks like a synthetic data set, which is true. Sometimes when I've prompted this, it hasn't picked up that this was a synthetic data set. So I found that kind of interesting. When I've picked it up that it's not synthetic, I'm like, okay, now I'm like fully scared of trusting the agent to do data analyses for me. Okay, let's see. Can you print out the first 10 rows of the file? Can you present the numeric values in scientific notation? Please do mean imputation for the missing values. So I also have asked it to do this. This would be quite sketchy. Mean imputation should be fine here because it's synthetic data. But if you had your own data, there's probably actual meaningful details for why your data is missing. And so just letting the AI just do something like that may not be recommended. And then I often find that it doesn't listen to all of your instructions. So I'm gonna tell it, make sure to run code with the Hood River Conda environment. Also tell me how many rows are in the data set and a summary of the column values. Okay. What? So the file that I prompted it with was hashtag file nonsensical data set. Any questions right now about this? I believe there are. File's the only one that I've played with so far. Maybe it would take me a lot to create another tutorial that would focus on agents, but maybe that's the next thing to do. And so we're seeing it telling us something. So it was configuring the Python environment, which is probably because I explicitly asked it to do that.
You might have already touched on this, but so why would you use an agent scenario versus just using the other method of control lag?
I mean, I have met and interacted with people who really like to use the agent and give very detailed instructions in these agent markdown files. And there's sort of the word going around of vibe coding. I don't recommend it. I'm hoping that as we look through and try and analyze this stuff, we'll have some examples where this made no sense and the agent has made some mistakes. So, but maybe some people, if you're doing a pretty routine analyses and you're doing pretty simple things, the agent could accelerate your like workflow. But I find in research, things are a lot more complicated. This agent usually wants to try and run this thing in this server, which at least in my current configuration, that hasn't been working very well. So I'm gonna skip that. It's gonna eventually just write a script file to the terminal. Yeah, I'm gonna skip that for now. It wanted me to check if there was this conda environment, which there is, because we've been using it the whole time. Okay, now it's gonna write a Python script, which is gonna do what I asked it to do, hopefully. That script is gonna be called analyze dataset.py. And if we look here in the window, we can see it's noting that there was a file change with plus 96 new lines. And maybe after we sort of verify what it outputs, we might decide to keep or undo that file change. And now it wants to run this command to the terminal, which is not going to work because it did not listen to me. So this is another bad example. I explicitly told it to use the conda environment that has the functions necessary.
So with agents, you can add a command, say, make up checks, or you can add checks like make sure that these things work at the end.
Yeah.
They do a much better job.
Yeah. Okay. Where would you put that? Really?
Just add those two.
That's fascinating. Maybe it's because, I don't know, do you think it's trying to make sure that no errors run or something?
Yeah, it kind of like does the kind of check.
Okay. Huh. Whatever. Yeah, it's previously I've gotten it to do this where it will also enter my like conda environment before running this. Yeah, that's a good tip. Does anyone think they would like to use this usually, or are there any like skeptics? Do you use it?
ChatGPT to like people and ask for like feedback on like code and things. So I have to paste everything to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But this allows like to understand their more complicated writing.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, the point of this. So I do believe also that these LLMs within the Copilot environment have been maybe slightly fine-tuned or to help with coding in particular, but also it's nice to not be like copying and pasting from the internet.
And I'm very curious to know how that prepare for. But I mean, for these, I can also.
Yeah, like with more complicated codes. I mean, I would suspect the accuracy is a function of how much it's this like this particular module or package has been written up in its documentation and Stack Overflow and other things online. Because yeah, really new packages or packages that very few people use, there's probably not. Yeah. Okay, let's hope that this runs because now it says that it's going to run it in the Hood River environment. Okay. So it's spitting this out in the terminal. in not the greatest fashion. But it's giving us a summary. So all of these have roughly 5% missing values in the columns. It imputed values when we had missingness that is pretty much always very close to 0. For each value, it's giving me a summary after imputation. And these summaries should look like a normal distribution in this case. And then it's telling me that it thinks there's this target variable and it's roughly balanced in this data set. Tell me how hashtag file sensical dataset.csv differs. Okay. I imagine in this like in this agent environment or in the agent markdown, you could probably add these things like do not make any mistakes. I think that's how it's supposed to work. Okay. So it's going to analyze. Yeah, I don't know. This stuff is really slow, clearly, when you have the agent. I have had people talk about like a growing difference between like the type of work you're doing. Like if we're starting to use these chatbots so much for coding, we're like leaving the aspect of it where like we're handwriting and maybe understand what we were actually writing to more about like reading the code and maybe trying to come up with unit tests to verify stuff. I don't know. I personally find it kind of much less fun. I do think people sometimes get into CS or statistics or something because they liked coding. And now we're kind of told not to do that because we're less effective. So it says it's going to do something that will compare the data sets. And I think I clicked. My computer is buffering. Okay. So it did some stuff, it computed some stuff. It tells me the number of rows and columns. I've actually, sometimes when I've asked it, it tells me a number of rows that is far off from the actual number of rows in the data set. And yeah. Okay. This appears to be a data set for predicting healthy diets. Some key differences, they both have the same structure. They have the same feature columns and target, same missing value patterns. The main difference seems to be the specific values and their relationships. Sensical seems to have some realistic or meaningful relationship versus nonsensical is random. So maybe my next prompt will be, can you fit some logistic regression models for the nonsensical and sensical data sets? Tell me the effect sizes and Pearson correlation coefficients with the targets and predictions for both data sets. And maybe we'll switch back to GPT-5. Make no mistakes. I think this is probably going to be the last thing I'm going to do. So we'll watch it work. And does anyone have any like final questions? Yeah. So one of the reasons that I am operating within this Git repo, that'll at least keep a version control. So, I mean, if I did commit something, I could go back and at least see that history and read it. You can, I believe, like click in. So, I mean, you could explicitly read it and see what it wrote. I mean, this is one of the things where it's challenging to say, let it write all these files and do all these analyses if you don't know how, if you're not familiar with that programming language to sort of even be able to read this. This is why I tried to explain a little bit about unit tests. So you could try to write a bunch of unit tests to verify that, but yeah, I mean, you can always click in here and decide before you accept it or keep it, but I don't have any great recommendation. I think it's kind of up to how comfortable you feel. So something went wrong, maybe. Yeah. Or placing the first to do, and then I'll verify. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you can see it almost wants to keep asking the same question. It says it's trying to address edge cases.
So for GPT-5, there is a package specifically made because the Google is called GPT-5 Exploit. Just put that in and fantastic, especially for
Okay.
it's thought at 4.5 was much better, but it costs it.
I see. Huh.
If you're allow, you can click on the arrow next to it and say allow all. But you don't have to click allow.
Oh, where is that? Where's the allow all?
Wait for the thing to come up. When you click allow, right next to it, there's an arrow. Click on it and say allow for the question.
Okay.
You don't have to be sitting around getting.
Okay. You're teaching me more than I'm teaching you. Yeah, I'm much more of, I write a lot of stuff on my own. So it is spitting out for the nonsensical data set, sort of the feature, various things. Okay. I don't really love the name of those, but I think this is the effect size that the regression has learned, which in the nonsensical data set, these are all pretty close to zero because they have zero relationship. And the model has pretty poor R versus you can see like more substantial effect sizes in the sensical data set when I am considering carrot, spinach, and broccoli. And the model has a much better R. And yeah, it spits out the same thing quite a few times in making redundant code. Okay, let's go back to this. Okay, is it this?
Yeah.
This will enable a configurable subset of commands to run. Okay. It assumes that the agent is not acting maliciously.
Then
Don't you see that it keeps trying to run like the same thing though? Over and over and over again? And yeah, it writes some, like it ran fit logistic and then it like says it's gonna run it again. Like, look, it runs it again, or it ran it twice. Anyway. Yeah, that's kind of all I have. Does anyone else have their own tricks about this or final questions? Yeah.
I mean, just because I'm kind of getting started in this, I'm just kind of curious from your standpoint, like when you first started to where you are now, like, just what are some things you kind of like picked up on the way, like some high level, kind of like keep in mind while learning Visual Studio Code?
Oh, Visual Studio, like learning Visual Studio Code or learning programming languages?
Using this tool to
Oh, I don't have a great answer to that because I do write a lot of the code myself. And I've never used the agent in my own workflow. I like autocomplete a lot. I like documentation a lot, which can help with the autocomplete. Most of the time, I trust the autocomplete when I know I'm starting to write something quite redundant. I have found that its autocomplete is really bad at knowing the names of files in my file explorer. And that's quite annoying because I end up clicking escape a lot because I've never really used it to debug. I know people have, or a lot of people that really believe in that. I've yet to do like unit tests, again, because I don't really I write things on my own often from scratch, but I would consider that a really good use case. And yeah, I do extensively the like control I for plotting, and typically I'm doing a lot of data analysis, so I do a lot of like control I for things like I know that like a function exists for like NumPy or pandas to like merge files, but I sometimes forget what it is. I don't know. Does anyone else have things like they've learned when they move around with VS Code that they like? Uh, I'm not sure because I do use RStudio. RStudio doesn't have any like generative AI in it right now, does it? Or my version doesn't. Which is why I have to do this like ask a question to the web browser, copy and paste it. I find that this like Visual Studio is kind of a pain to use in R. And I've never really found Jupyter notebooks to be great for R compared to like Python. Yeah, I don't know. I have some colleagues that love Cursor. Is Cursor like its own IDE, or you just like put the cursor? It's a fork of VS Code. Hmm. Yeah, I can't really help you there. I I know like probably 80% or more of people just use Visual Studio Code. Yeah.
I was curious about something too. You were talking about user analysis. So, like, say, like, you have one like, lot of data that you want to like look at, and then you get new data. Like, how do you take like the new data and basically convert it in without having to rewrite it?
Is the new data of like all of the same file details?
Do you have that in your stuff? Or?
Well, yeah, but can't you just change the file name? Like when I'm doing like data analysis, I'll like write a bunch of code to read in some table and I have it plot things or manipulate things and I just change the file name. I do that manually and like verify when I move through like a notebook. Yeah, I think as I said, I haven't used the agent much yet, so maybe you need to prompt it and say like, okay, can you apply the same thing that you've done, but with this new file? Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes write scripts that if I know all the files look the same, that take as input the file name, and then I just run it on the terminal. Yeah, I would say figure out what works for you and your workflow. I don't think there's a best practice that'll make you like X% more productive, but maybe you've seen some features you can use that might be useful. So yeah, as I said, I don't use agents, but I find autocomplete really helpful, and I find documentation with autocomplete really helpful.
Just use the chat to ask, but then it propose a change, but then in there you can just say apply to the file, and then it'll give you like a list that you can accept or not. Nice. And then one other one was you hashtag a code base. If you wanted to actually take into account everything in the directory. But
What?
this isn't agent.
Oh, it's the code base, like.
So it'd be like, oh, wherever you are in the whatever directory you're in, take account of other files.
Yeah.
I tend to use that if I'm like, oh, I'll be in one file, but I want to take it out the other
Oh.
scripts in there. But then I use ask, but I don't want to start making.
Nice.
Are you from Oregon?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I went to U of O as well. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad somebody noticed why the why the environment was called Hood Reader. That's like my standard environment with just like NumPy and pandas and stuff, versus for each like new research project or something, I create a separate environment. That's Oh, wow. Okay, it's like reading everything.
Yeah, no, so it'll like read the,
Love
I
it.
don't know, anyway. I've been messing around with this, but I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm crazy, but
I mean, maybe this is like a good practice if you're using somebody else's repo.
yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's like, okay, get a, yeah. Fork of it and explain
Yeah.
to me.
Oh, like fork your own repo or fork?
Fork someone else's.
Yeah, and then do code base.
You can highlight code and just say explain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that would be a lot more. It would be nice to do this code base on other people's repos because some people's repos are crazy.
yes.
Or have like enormous amounts of code. So like my main repo, I don't know, it just like goes like, I think it's organized well, but it's just got like a ton of, it's got like folders of different things and like more scripts and then
I mostly done MATLAB and R, GraphQL and a little Python, but not in a very Python way. So I've been just messing to learn more about making packages. That's super easy for that.
nice.
Okay.